Hey there, friends. I'm excited to bring you guys this video today with Marc Victor from Attorneys on Retainer. And we're going to be ramping up a series, hopefully once a month, where we take real life stories, such as the one we discussed today, and look at how either attorneys on retainer would defend you if you were the one pulling the trigger, or just look at these instances in general and see, okay, was it a good shoot or a bad shoot? And then discuss how they would have taken it from there. Check this one out. This is a good one. Hey guys, I'm here with Marc Victor with Attorneys for Freedom. Marc is the owner and founder of the organization. He's also a former Marine, and you may recognize the name Attorneys on Retainer. Now, Attorneys on Retainer is somebody that I have talked about at length. You'll remember a lot of this conversation started with the USCCA thing with Alan Coley, and obviously one of the organizations that really rose to the top as far as talking about these and really shedding some light on the topic was Attorneys on Retainer and, of course, Attorneys for Freedom. Marc Victor is somebody that I've wanted to talk to for a long time. You're probably going to see him a little bit more here on the show. Marc, welcome, and glad to have you here, buddy.
Paul, it's such an honor and a pleasure to be on your show, man. I'm really pumped up to be here and excited to talk to you about whatever you want to talk about. I got a whole wide range of pro-freedom related issues, pro-Second Amendment issues, Constitution stuff, criminal justice system stuff, man. Let's bust it out.
Let's do it, man. And I actually have a very strange story, and I've pumped the brakes on this one. Last week, I wanted to put a story out on it, but I was like, you know what? This is going to be better with somebody that this is more in their wheelhouse as far as being able to answer the questions that I could not answer, not being an attorney. So I think you're the perfect person for that. So I'm excited to talk about this. This is the Crumbley story. This is the Michigan teenager who had the Rampage shooting at the school a couple of years ago, who's 15 years old at the time. And the mother was brought in and put on trial as a result of, let's just say, for the sake of simplifying it, that she allowed access to the gun. And I hate using that because I know that's more of a leftist tactic as far as allowing access, but that's what the courts have used. And I want to give a little bit of backstory on this real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes of of what took place. Let's see. A Michigan jury convicted the mother of a teenager who fatally shot 4 classmates at a high school near Detroit of manslaughter after prosecutors argued she bore responsibility because she and her husband gave their son a gun and ignored warning signs. It's believed to be the first time that a parent faced a manslaughter charge in the United States stemming from a school shooting by a child. Manslaughter does carry a penalty of up to 15 years in prison. So that's what the mother faces right now.
Times 4.
Right.
Yeah.
The couple's son, Ethan, was 15 at the time of the shooting, and he used a semi-automatic handgun. He pleaded guilty already in 2022 to 4 counts of first-degree murder and charges, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Now, let me just give real quick before we get into this, because I want to make sure that everyone watching understands the details of this case, because this is one that I think will truly have ripple effects across the country going forward. Okay, what happened and how the parents presumably are tied into this is, according to prosecutors, James Crumbley purchased the gun. This is the father. James Crumbley is the father. Purchased the handgun used in the crime 4 days before the November 30th, 2021 shooting. On the morning of the shooting, a teacher discovered drawings by Ethan Crumbley, who is the son who performed the shooting. The drawings depicted a handgun, a bullet, and a bleeding figure next to the words, "Blood everywhere, my life is useless, and thoughts won't stop, help me." The Crumbleys, the parents, were summoned to the school that morning. They were told that Ethan needed counseling and they needed to take him home. But the couple resisted taking their son home and did not search his backpack. And I think that's a key point too. No one searched his backpack. And they did not ask him about the gun that they had purchased 4 days earlier. And they had gone out to the range, so they knew the boy knew how to operate the gun. Jennifer Crumbley, the mom, challenged that account, telling jurors that she, her husband, and teachers mutually agreed that Ethan could remain in school that day and that she did not think he posed a danger to fellow students. Ethan Crumbley was returned to class and later walked out of a bathroom with the gun, began firing, and that's when he shot the other students. So that's it at a very high level in a nutshell. Marc, my question to you is, you being on the side, of course, attorneys, but also attorneys on retainer, where a person would have protection in the event of a self-defense type situation. Now, we can all agree this was not self-defense. I realize that. But I think one of the biggest sticking points of attorneys on retainer versus some of these other organizations out there is that you can still cover people in different types of situations. The first question on everybody's mind, of course, is going to be, if whether it were Ethan or the mother if either one of them had a policy, or let's say a plan, I should say, with attorneys on retainer, how would that have played out in this type of situation?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Paul. And, when people think about attorneys on retainer, usually we're ticking off all of the things that we do not exclude. But this case actually presents a really good one of a case we would decline as a self-defense. First, as to Ethan, right? He takes the firearm, he goes into the bathroom, he takes it out of the bag, he goes into the classroom, and he starts blowing kids away. There's really no argument to assert self-defense. There's no evidence of self-defense. He's not getting on the stand and saying some kind of contorted version of the facts. I was acting in self-defense. Hard to even imagine that. But there's no argument for self-defense. So if you're looking for a case that attorneys on retainer program would say, denied as a self-defense related matter, that's one right there. But one of the things that distinguishes us from so many of these other companies, I think all of the other companies, frankly, because we're a law firm, people forget that we also have another part of the attorneys on retainer program, which is what we call the non-self-defense related matter. We're criminal defense lawyers at our firm. We have a whole law firm that represents people charged with all kinds of different crimes that have nothing to do with self-defense. So we open that up for people. So if Ethan had been a member of the attorneys on retainer program, he wouldn't get us for free like he would if it was a self-defense related matter. But because it's another felony, he would be able to hire us at what I call kind of like the friends and family discount. We give you 35% off of the regular hourly rates at our firm. We have a lot of lawyers at our firm. People say, hey, Mark, what are the rates? Okay, fine. Here are the rates. $350 an hour are as typical for most of the attorney associates at our firm. Andy's at $450 an hour. And I've just limited my practice. I don't do anything besides firearms related self-defense matters now. My hourly rate is $850 an hour for those kinds of cases, and that's all I'm going to court on now. Even though we work as a team on all criminal cases, and I consult and I'm involved in every criminal case at the firm. As to Mom, pretty much same analysis, okay? Mom is charged with an involuntary manslaughter. That can be the type of a crime where you might allege self-defense, but there's no argument for that here. So she would also be declined as a self-defense related matter. But if she wanted us to defend her, we could easily do that. In fact, this would have been a fun case to defend. Not so much for the kid. That's a hard one. That one's going to plead all day long, as he did plead in this case. He didn't seem like he got much for it because he got a natural life sentence. But the mom's case is probably one that should have gone to trial. It's maybe unfortunate that she lost here, but that would have been a fun one to go to trial. We would have worked really hard to bend over backwards to take that case, because that would have been a fun one to litigate in court. And my lawyers like to do trials. This would have been a fun trial.
Well, and you bring up a good point about the trial. In my mind, and again, for full disclosure, I'm clearly not an attorney and don't want to be an attorney, but I also look at things that are a pivotal point in a trial, what pushed it in a particular direction. And I want to get your feedback on this. I look at what we just talked about, how we got here as far as this trial and all that. Okay, the parents being summoned to the school, pretty much trying to get them involved. Now, I still believe that the school has some accountability here, but at the same time, I don't put a whole lot of confidence in public school systems. I think that
why should you put any?
Correct.
Government, these are government-run schools. So you shouldn't put any. What are we doing with government-run schools? That's another question. We should do a whole show on that.
Well, you being a constitutionalist, you and I both know that's not even in the Constitution. They should have zero control over
right. The federal government has no business being involved in education. It's not one of the things in Article 1, Section 8 that lays out what was supposed to be very specific and limited duties of powers of Congress. And that's not in there. Neither, by the way, is regulating firearms.
That's right. Well, I mean, the thing that bothers me about that, and we could have a whole conversation on that, is the states have gotten to a point where they created the government. Now the states act like the government created them. And it's amazing to me how the roles have shifted over time, where the states kind of have let's just say they've run from their own responsibilities, kind of like Congress runs from theirs and punts the ball to the ATF. The states are allowing the federal government to do that. The states should be the ones in full control of every dime associated with education and have no guidance from the federal government, which, by the way, the federal government fails miserably at every single thing they do. What makes us think they can get education right? Look how stupid our kids are compared to the rest of the world.
Since you cracked the door on this, Paul, I'm going to say, to me, the discussion we need to have in America that we are not having is, what is the role of the federal government, or even government generally? What is supposed to be the job of government? This is a debate between one side, I think the right position, that says government is supposed to be our agent. We enact them to protect our rights. They defend our rights. That's their job. The other side is going to say, no. The job of the federal government or any government is to take care of you from cradle to grave, make sure you have a nice life and you make good decisions with your life and this, that, and the next thing. To which I would say, and I think all people who support freedom would say, no, that's a nanny state. That's an anti-freedom position. That's the reason we do what we do. That's why we're called the attorneys for freedom, because if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about these issues. I want to have that debate. What's the purpose of government? Until we have that debate and win that debate in the United States, we're going to be in the mess that we find ourselves in right now. We're going to continue to be in that same mess because we don't agree on what the heck this government thing is supposed to be doing.
I think we can also agree, you and I, that if we asked Americans what the government's role is, the federal government's role in anything, that question would be answered a whole lot differently 100 years ago versus today. Because, people are simply not educated on what those processes are supposed to be. But in this case, with I guess you and I could go off on 100 tangents, and I'm happy to take that trip with you too, because I like doing that. But in this particular case, with the facts on the trial, it seems to me like the parents refusing to take the boy home. Obviously, they bought him a gun. That seems, and I say seems because I'm not privy to the information in this case, that seems a little sketchy for a kid that probably had some signs that were noticeable. As a parent, I'm speaking as a parent. I'm not trying to say that the government should have controlled this or that the school. I'm talking about the parents. Seems like they should have noticed some of these things. Again, the book that I wrote, How to Make a Monster, most of these signs are pretty obvious to the average everyday parent who is plugged into what their child is doing. I have to watch every single social media post that they make. You can just watch the changes in your child, their own little things. And I hate to put it all on the parent because, again, I'm all about accountability and self-responsibility. But let's face it, a 15-year-old has some influence from the parents. And you cannot expect that 15-year-old to operate independently with no interaction with the parents, especially whenever he's going down that wrong path. The parents have a responsibility at that point to help guide that young man.
Paul, I certainly don't want to go down another tangent here, but you stumbled upon the other big discussion we need to have in the United States is parenting. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I find myself in court talking about horrible parents. That's the reason why so many of these troubled people get to court, because they had crappy parents. We got to do a better job. We should be talking about parenting. We should be helping each other be better parents. This is not something the government can fix. This is something parents got to fix. But putting that aside, back to Crumbly for a second. I think you got to step back and first ask yourself the question, should it ever be a crime for a parent to be responsible for doing something or failing to do something in regards to something their kid does, right? If you can imagine a spectrum here, right? On one side is the parent knowing that the kid is going to shoot up the school. The kid says, I think it'd be fun to shoot up the school. And the parent says, okay, little Johnny, here's your firearm. Go have fun at the school. Okay, that parent's going to be responsible, right? On the other end of the spectrum is the parent who's trying to do everything right, doing a good job, taking precautions. And this stupid kid, unbeknownst to the parent who would have had no reason to know there was any problems with the kid, takes a firearm and goes to school and does some horrible thing. Okay, that parent shouldn't be responsible. So the question is, where do you draw this line? And to me, the discussion that we should be having about this kind of case is what types of acts should be crimes. Historically, what we care about in criminal law are two things. One, what did you do? We call this the actus reus. And then second, what were you thinking about when you did what you did? We call that the mens rea. And as to the mens rea part, what were you thinking about? Most crimes require an intentional mens rea. I intended to do the act that caused the crime, or reckless mens rea, which is generally, I'm aware of a risk that something bad is going to happen. I don't want the bad thing to happen, but heck, I'm going to do it anyways. You know, this is the situation where maybe you're getting in a race on the road, right? You got I think about my younger self, right? You're in your Corvette and somebody pulls up next to you in a 5.0 Mustang and everybody's racing there. You know it's dangerous, right? You know you're in a residential area. If you're driving 100 miles an hour, bad things can happen. You don't want that to happen, but you say, you know what? I'd rather do the race. I'm going to do it anyways. That's classic recklessness. Those are typically crimes. But then as you drop down, you get to negligence. Negligence is usually a civil standard. Negligence is about, I didn't think about that this could be a problem. It was sort of an unconscious thing, but I was still acting unreasonably. This is, you're driving down your road and you're paying attention to the stereo, and you're not really paying it, or your friends, you're goofing off in the backseat talking to them, and boom, you hit a car. You didn't even think about, oh, this is dangerous conduct. You were just acting unreasonably. Normally, negligence goes into the civil world. Involuntary manslaughter is classically negligence. Now, we call it gross negligence or criminal negligence to sneak it into the criminal side. We say, you've been really, really unreasonable here. I got to tell you, as a criminal defense lawyer, I don't like negligence crimes. I think if you just did something, you didn't really think about it, you were just acting unreasonably, you're in the civil world. And there's no question the parents should be sued for being negligent. And so is the school, by the way. They should have checked the backpack. They knew that this kid had problems. They should be sued. But to say we're going to put somebody behind bars, I want recklessness conduct here. Now, this particular statute, I happen to have the model penal code in Michigan and the definition of involuntary manslaughter. They require gross negligence. It's sort of a squishy standard, and they define it differently in every state. But to me, if the parents check the box of recklessness, then I'm okay with it being a crime. And so as you dig into the facts here, the question is, did the mom know enough in her head to think, this little 15-year-old kid of mine with a gun, him having free access to the gun, is this a risk of a big harm to somebody out there in the world? And I think this case is a close call, because there's a lot of information here that suggests that the parents knew this kid's got mental health problems. He's even asking for counseling. You got the school now saying, hey, can you take him home? He's
right.
Here's a drawing with blood and guts and people, and I can't control myself and all these problems. You would think that would be a good time for the mom to think, he's got access to a gun. Maybe I should make sure, because I know I didn't lock it up in the house. I kept it unlocked somewhere. I should check his bag or do something more. There's a risk here that something bad could happen. So I didn't listen to the evidence, right? I think we have juries for a reason. They sat there. They evaluated the witnesses. They listened to the evidence. If they came to the conclusion that mom had enough knowledge and damn sure should have done something. And on this point, there's a parenting point. If you're going to give a firearm to a 15-year-old kid, you've got some responsibility to make sure that kid is not going to hurt somebody. Now, you're not an insurance company, and it's not a strict liability. Shit can still happen, right? Things happen. But you got to take some responsibility. And I think when mom is aware that your son's got mental health issues and the school is saying take him home, and there's more evidence here. The parents are told about paranoia and hallucinations months earlier. There's all kinds of problems. He thinks there's a demon throwing things around the house.
That's right.
You are on notice that something is wrong with your kid. This might be a good time to lock the firearm up or to take it away and say, you know what, little Johnny, no guns for you right now until I am convinced as your responsible parent, you're not going to do anything wrong with the firearm. So I don't fault the jury here. I didn't see enough of the evidence, frankly, to really make that call. But this is a close call. It's not a new law. It's a new prosecution because no parent has been prosecuted under these circumstances. But Involuntary manslaughter has been on the books since we've had books, right? We call it negligent homicide in Arizona. Again, I would get rid of negligent crimes, but to me, is this a recklessness crime, which you would typically call voluntary manslaughter? Maybe. It's a big maybe for me. It depends on the facts.
And you bring up a good point, and I want to make this very clear. I ordinarily would never support somebody else going to jail for something somebody else did. But you bring up a really good point. These signs that the parents were aware of were there. Like you said, the demons and things like that. These are not things that just the school witnessed. The parents knew all of the trouble that this kid was going through. Because I want to make this really clear. I know that this case is going to be used to go after gun owners in America. I know this. And I don't mean the organization Gun Owners of America. I'm talking about us gun owners in America. Yeah. I know this is going to be a very pivotal case that they're going to look to say, see, this is already, they're setting precedent in this already. However, if there's a time where I believe as a parent, you don't know your child is a troubled child until you know your child is a troubled child, right? There is a point where you realize that there are going to be families, I believe, that will not have those signs like in this Crumley case. Crumley case, the signs were there. I mean, the evidence, no matter how much you skim over the evidence, you can tell that the signs were there, and the jury had a lot to work with as far as recognizing the parents knew that their child was troubled, and they still purchased that firearm, right? Yep. That's where I think the sticking point. In fact, I want to make a quick point on that. The jury actually asked the judge in this case while they were sequestered or whatever, can we get more information on how the child obtained the gun? Or they wanted more data as to who purchased it. That wasn't brought up in the trial. And the judge said, no, you have to work with the information that was brought up in the trial itself. I'm not going to gather more information for you. So it sounds like that was a very pivotal point with the jury, recognizing that the parents knew something was going on, and they still elected to get this kid a gun. And I think the question was, how was it secured, or was it secured? They wanted more detail on that. I'm not in favor personally of, I will never be in favor of forcing anyone to secure their guns however the government thinks they should be secured, because I do not think the government is looking out for my best interest in any way, especially in that way.
You think?
You're right. So I don't need someone telling me that. I'm mature enough and know what the level of threat is in my house, my neighborhood, my city. I can gauge that level of threat and know if I have a young one around, what is more important? Educating my child that this gun is dangerous, or not knowing that threat could kick my door in at any minute. And I'm just being real here. I mean, you have to balance, I believe, as a gun owner, those threats. Which one is more important to me? I don't want my kid having access to a gun if he's a nutbag. But at the same time, there are nutbags out there that might want to do me harm. I'm fortunate enough not to live in one of those areas, but if I did, that would be a difficult task for me. So I don't know. These people did live in Michigan, by the way. So Detroit is not exactly the light on a shining hill, or the shining light on a hill for being a safe place to live. So these parents may have had a difficult decision. But again, I go back to, they saw the threats that this child had issues. And I don't like putting blame on somebody else, but we also have to be reasonable at some point and realize, if all these warning signs are out there for this child, at what point do you as a parent have to realize this is a difficult decision for me, and I have to make a decision right here that I might not be happy with?
Yeah, there's some important points in here. The first point I would make if I was actually trying this case is, you're not held, and this is good across the board for self-defense, you're not held to a standard of perfection, right? And the hard decisions, you're saying, I got a problem kid, but on the other hand, I got to be ready in case a problem person breaks in my house. So I'm making judgments about things. You're not held to a standard of perfection. The question is, were you unreasonable, right? All of self-defense is about, not did you act perfectly, did you act reasonably, given all of the facts and circumstances? Always the question in a self-defense case. But the other point that we skim over too quickly, in my opinion, even if you imagine the worst case scenario, right? You've got your crazy woke prosecutor who's going to bring a crazy woke anti-Second Amendment prosecution against a good parent. Say you have a great parent, right? Excellent parent. They did everything they could possibly do. And yet still the kid because the kid got in with some friends who convinced him to do something stupid, found the gun, saw the dad enter the code in for the safe, or found out where the dad hid the key, got the gun against the dad, so did something horrible, and now they're prosecuted. Okay, there was a reason several of the states didn't want to ratify the Constitution at the beginning, because they damn well insisted that the right to a jury trial be included. And we shouldn't forget that our founding fathers said nobody goes to prison unless a group of their fellow citizens agrees first. At the end of the day, that's where the power resides in a criminal case. It's going to be our fellow citizens are going to have to sit there. They're supposed to be the final check on a tyrannical government. If you want to know where the breakdown in the system is, that jury could always send back a prosecution by some crazy woke prosecutor against responsible parents and say, you know what? We're not convicting this person. Now, this goes off on a slightly different tangent. I think defense lawyers like me should be able to stand in front of the jury and talk about jury nullification and say, even if you think that the prosecutor has proven each element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt, you still have the power to come back and say, you know what, this is a stupid law. And I'm thinking about victimless. Imagine you got somebody charged with having a firearm with the barrel being an inch too short, and they're actually guilty of this. They found it. The person says, yes, it's mine. Did you know it was too short? Yes, I sawed it off myself, whatever. Okay, that guy's going to be guilty of that crime. But it's a BS crime. I should be able to stand in front of that jury and say, ladies and gentlemen, even if you think he proved it, send a message back to this prosecutor that this law is ridiculous, and judge the law as well as the facts. And to be clear, I can't do this today in court, nor can any lawyer in any state, to my knowledge, bring a what we call jury nullification defense. And this is one of the things among educating our fellow citizens who are on the jury and could send stupid prosecutions back, rejecting them soundly. It falls on us. We're supposed to be the final check against a tyrannical government as the jury. And I think that's where we're failing in a lot of places. It's not the government, it's the people. Look, these politicians don't fall out of the sky and into Congress. They get elected there by people who say, yeah, I want this person to put them in the Congress. We need to do better. We need to get better people representing us who have a better understanding of freedom, not just let me push my personal agenda on other people. This is what gives us this constant fight between one side and the other, everybody trying to control everybody else. Look, if you are not a threat to anybody, that you have a gun is not my business. If you are a threat, then it's my business. I don't want to be threatened. And so that's where the law should draw the line always, on all issues.
To your point about the jury, that's the other thing that where I know where this case, not this case, but this example of a case goes next. Obviously, we're already hearing the anti-gun movement take this and run with it and trying to push this up to Congress to pass a safe storage law. This is my deal. As long as we have a jury of our peers, not that I totally trust that, depends on where you live, if it's really a jury of your peers, but as long as we do have that jury of our peers, I would much rather that jury be able to make some kind of a argument amongst themselves as to whether or not I acted negligently in how I stored my gun than there being a law that negates the fact that you don't need a jury because the law says you were wrong regardless. I know this because I've done testing on these things. There is not a gun safe or a safe that cannot be defeated. Yeah. So at what point do you pass a law where it says you have to store your gun? This is the stupid part, unloaded and locked up. Okay, good luck defending yourself and your family. But at the same time, if you do have that kind of requirement out there, so just because somebody breaks into my safe and pulls the gun out, who decides that that gun was unloaded by law? They can say, well, he shot somebody with it and it just took him a second, so maybe it wasn't unloaded. In other words, you start passing a law that takes away the ability of the jury to decide my fate. I don't like that. I don't want you being able to put something in black and white because it's not all black and white. There are gray areas throughout the method to store, how that person got in there. Does the locking start at just the lock of the safe, or is it the door of the bedroom going in? You know what I mean? There's so many variables that could be thrown in there, and somebody, oh, this was an unsafe storage, and boom, you got a charge against you. That's what bothers me by passing some new law on something as stupid as this, that the gun owner should be able to make that decision on.
Yeah, and I think this is the kind of thing that we in the firearms community, but I don't really like, pro-gun, anti-gun. I think more generally pro-freedom, anti-freedom, right? Because to me, those are the two groups, right? Pro-gun is a subset of pro-freedom. There are other freedoms out there, right? And anti-gun, you're generally anti-freedom. You're trying to control what other people are doing who are not posing a risk to you. So we need to have a conversation with ourselves in the Second Amendment community and present in a better way so we can be more influential. And one of the things I was going to say here too, and I do this for a living, so there's a fun to mess around with these questions, but you can take what you're saying, which all sounds very reasonable to me, but turn the dials a little bit. Now let's change from a semi-automatic to a fully automatic, or some stuff that I fired in the Marine Corps, shoulder-fired grenades. Missiles essentially with grenades on them, or go even heavier, talk about explosives or dangerous chemicals. Should there be some point on that spectrum where we say, there's some rule about you got to store it a certain way. You got now 2 tons of explosives in a residential neighborhood, and you've decided to leave it just recklessly sitting around your house. Like, do we need to wait until we have this gigantic explosion, or is the local community justified and say, you know what? If you're going to have 2 tons of TNT, you got to make sure it's stored in a way where your 4-year-old doesn't throw a match in there or something, or spark something. So there might be places where reasonable minds can say, okay, you're now out of the gray area and you're in either a white area or a black area where all reasonable people agree. And I think to the extent we take these absolute positions on things, I think it makes us seem a bit unreasonable. And I know why we do that, because the other side is so damn unreasonable. Whatever point we say, okay, this is reasonable, they're going to try to extend that and use it as a slippery slope and contort it because they really don't want people having guns. But I think that's a separate conversation. We should say, look, here's a reasonable rule, and that rule should not be used by people who just want to ban firearms from everybody, because that's an unreasonable position, which is why we really got to win hearts and minds for the ideas underlying this stuff, which is, what is a free society about? Once we get people on that page, then we got people who are interpreting these things in the right ways so we can maximize everybody's freedom and get to peace and get to our highest level of prosperity, because that's what makes nations great. To the extent you're free, that's what makes you a great nation. That's what raises standards of living. That's what makes our kids live better than us. We got to get back to what made our country great, which is more freedom, not less freedom. And to some arguments, there's arguments we're heading in the wrong direction. On the other hand, look, the Supreme Court is more pro-Second Amendment now than they have ever been in the history of the Supreme Court. So, while I feel like we do still need to be fighting about these issues, we got a court that, while it may take a few years to, like the craziness that's going on in California with this SB2, and we're making everything a sensitive place, at the end of the day, this isn't going to stand. The court is not going to allow overburdensome laws that don't allow responsible, competent adults to take firearms outside their homes. Like, we already know that, given the makeup of the Supreme Court, unless something tremendously bad happens and a bunch of them die and a left-wing president gets to appoint a whole bunch of people in there. What we should be doing is trying to win the hearts and minds of our fellow Americans to convince them, like this crazy socialist and Marxist stuff that's pushing us in the wrong direction, that every country that's tried it has failed. It's why there's no Soviet Union. And say, look, capitalism and free markets and individual responsibility, you got rights, but you've got responsibilities too. And you don't have a right to live at the expense of your neighbor. We need to be pushing this stuff out there and advocating for freedom generally, so we can win all of the issues, not just one issue at a time.
One quick point that I want to make regarding that Crumley case, and I really want to get your opinion on this. One of the defense, or part of the defense of Miss Crumley, was that she said that it was her husband's responsibility to store the gun. As an attorney, how do you see that? I mean, is there a point where you're looking for enough information to decide, okay, she doesn't have that responsibility because let's just simplify it in terms of chores. That was dad's chore. Mom was doing dishes, and I don't know, let me find something manly so I don't piss anybody off. Mom was cutting grass, all right? So the dad was supposed to be storing the gun, and he didn't do it. As an attorney, how do you approach that? Is that a reasonable argument to make?
I think it's a reasonable argument. Whether it's a winning argument, it wasn't in this case. But, look, you're a parent. You have responsibilities that are non-delegable, right? You have a responsibility to take care of your kid. Now, you might say, okay, look, you do this, I'll do that. My guess is the dad is not going to come into court in a while when his trial starts and say, yes, I admit it was my responsibility. I was in charge of securing the firearm and I blew it. I doubt he's going to say that.
Right.
But if you can convince a jury that it was responsible for her to believe and that he agreed and that's what actually happened, you could kind of wiggle her out. And the way I would be arguing it is, look, she wasn't perfect and she could have done some things different. But the thing that bothered me most about the facts, and I wrote it down here, I didn't see it in court, but as I was reviewing the case, Mom said on the stand she wouldn't have done anything differently. And when I hear that, I think to myself, if I'm on the jury and I hear that, but not a good look. I would have prepped her on that stand to say, of course I would have done things. I would have done everything I could possibly have done to avoid this tragedy, and I didn't know, and if I had known, I would have acted, and to make her look more reasonable. But when she says, nothing I would have done differently, I think that's the kind of thing that annoys the jury. And maybe that's just bad lawyering. I don't know. She has a right to take the stand. She probably has to take the stand in a case like this. But when your client takes the stand, you got to prep the client. Like, we spend a long time, not just on direct exam, which could have gone better here, but also cross-exam. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I get clients who I want to put them on the stand, but they're so bad that it's really hard to. And other times, this is why I like to meet with them in person, right? So I can get a feel in the first very meeting. How's a jury going to like or dislike this person? Now, the most famous case I ever tried, the Baby Gabriel case, and people could just Google Baby Gabriel. I came out in closing argument and said, I know you don't like my client. I don't even like her. And we pulled that off with a good jury verdict on that because I knew they weren't going to like her. So I sort of gave up that point. But right. You really got to think about how this stuff plays to a jury, because at the end of the day, the jury is making the decision. And I think they just didn't like her parenting here. And when you get on the stand and say, there's nothing I would have changed, 4 kids died, and there's nothing I would have changed, I think that doesn't make you look good to a jury.
Yeah, if she would have changed that wording just to say there might have been some things I would have done different, boy, that might have even been enough to give her somewhat of a pass. What
if you say to the school on the day of the shooting, oh, thanks for letting me know. By the way, I just want to make sure you guys know that we did give him a gun for Christmas. That might cause them to say, well, he's got a bag here. Maybe we should check to make sure he doesn't have the gun. And now you've avoided the whole problem just by saying, now, are you required to say that? Should you be required to say that? No, I don't think that. But under these circumstances, would it be reasonable for her to say, you're telling me my kid's got these problems. You're telling me take him home. I know he's got problems. I know something you don't know, which is we just bought him a Christmas gift. I also know the gun is not secured somewhere in the house. Maybe dad's responsible, but not secured. Might be a good time, even if you don't want to tell them, hey, little son of mine, let me just check your bag. I'm a responsible parent, just to make sure you don't have anything in there you shouldn't have, like a firearm. The kid was just searching for ammunition. He got caught in school on his phone looking to buy ammo. He's thinking about this stuff. Seems like, I just know if it was me, I don't want my kid getting in her kid's now in prison for the rest of his life. It's just not good parenting here.
Well, you got to figure the 15-year-old kid being the least responsible one out of all the adults in this conversation, when the kid's already been busted at school and they're trying to get him to take him home, he's probably sitting there thinking, these dumbasses are not even checking my bag.
Right.
He's probably the one thinking more than anything, am I going to get away with this? Because he's thinking how stupid the adults in the room are, because nobody is checking this guy. I'm talking about the school or the parents. Like, am I going to actually get away with this?
There's stuff in the guy's journal, and I don't know why this came into the trial, because it was clear that the mom never saw the journal, the kid's journal. But in the kid's journal, he writes things in there. I'm about to shoot up the school and spend the rest of my life in prison. In his journal.
Wow.
The shooting is tomorrow. He says, I'm fully committed. I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. Many people have about 1 day to live. Now, this is really inflammatory stuff. And if I was doing the appeal here, the first thing I would say is, if the mom didn't see this, then why is it relevant, right? Because it's not in the mom's calculation. And because it comes in, I think it's highly inflammatory to the jury. We have a rule of evidence, Rule 403, that says even if it's probative, right? If the probative means it's relevant and it's helpful to the case, and I don't think it is, by the way, because the mom didn't know about it. If the prejudicial value substantially outweighs how probative it is. I think the probative value is very low here because the mom didn't see it, unless you want to argue she knew about it, in which case it's devastating to the defense. But I think that the mom testified on the stand, I didn't know about it. When you bring this stuff, just having me read it, right, and you hear that stuff, tomorrow's people are going to die, I'm going to shoot up the school. The jury is going to look at that and say, oh my God, this is a really bad case, I'm going to convict. So maybe this will be a good issue on appeal. It'd be probably the first thing I'd be looking at on appeal, because that's what you're arguing on appeal. There was something about the trial that violated due process, right? It's not a perfect trial, but it was not fair enough. And we should do a do-over, retry the case, keep that evidence out. You have a hard time picking the jury on a high-profile case. As I mentioned, the Baby Gabriel case, the Elizabeth Johnson case. We took days to pick the jury on that case because you got to get people. You're not going to get people who have said, I never heard anything about it. But you're going to get people, hopefully, who will say, I've heard some things, but I can put all of that aside, get it out of my head. I'm willing to listen to the evidence anew and fresh, and the person's coming in presumed innocent. It's a question I ask at the beginning. How would you vote right now? And some people say, well, I don't know. I don't have enough evidence. Wrong answer. The right answer is right now the vote is not guilty because they presumed innocent. And you got to make sure the jury understands what their job is. So there's a lot to talk about here on this case. We could go for hours on this one, Paul.
Well, and as you know, we don't have hours. We are getting pressed for time here. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other things that Attorneys for Freedom do. You guys are involved in a lot more than just protecting us gun owners out there with attorneys on retainer. Tell me about some of the other things you guys have going on.
Well, the thing I care about the most in my public life is not making money. It's not that I'm against making money. I'm a capitalist. I think everybody should make as much as they can make honestly and fairly and consistently with high character. But money's not the most important thing. We're called the Attorneys for Freedom for a reason. Freedom is most important. Your money is valueless if you don't have your freedom. So we're all activists at our firm, and we started this global peace movement. I'm very, very proud of it, and I'm writing a book to support it, and it's getting very close. It's called the Live and Let Live Global Peace Movement. If you like the phrase live and let live, if you think that would be a good rule to sort of govern our interactions as humans, you will love what Live and Let Live Global Peace Movement is about. People can find out about it by going to liveandletlive.org. There's a legal principle, which is basically, look, live your life, but don't interfere with other people's rights to live their lives. And then a moral principle, which is be an excellent human. And we're trying to push people to act with the highest of character and to bring out the best versions of themselves and to build high levels of trust with other human beings. We got to get back to a place where our word means something again. There's a whole list of what we call aspirational values. They're all voluntary. We're not trying to put them in the law. We got to get morality out of the law, not into the law. But that doesn't mean we should abandon it. We should push it as hard as we can. We got to get back to some moral ideas in our country so we can get some semblance to get us to not just freedom, but peace. Hell, we're all on the planet for a short period of time. We are brothers and sisters. We got to get along better because all of our days are limited. So if people are interested in the bigger issues, and there are people all over the world right now very excited about the Live and Let Live Global Peace Movement. So I hope people who are motivated by freedom and peace and are interested in more than just the very important issue of the right to keep and bear arms, but other issues as well, right? There's taxes, there's your property, there's the COVID questions, there's all kinds of other issues out there. We want to improve them all. Our goal is to leave the world better than we found it. So go to liveandletlive.org, check it out if you like it. Join the movement. It's pre-launch right now. We're getting ready to launch it very soon. And I've always loved feedback. If people want to contact me, I'm the easiest lawyer on the planet to get a hold of. Just email me. It's Marc, M-A-R-C, at attorneysforfreedom.com. And if you bring it civilized, you always get a response from me.
Good. I like it. And I'm going to go check the website out myself. I'll post the link as well. I do want to circle back to attorneys on retainer. Of course, people can go to attorneysonretainer.us. Again, attorneysonretainer.us. If you do go there, I am a proud paid member. It's important that I say this to my viewers. I've paid for my own. I mean, I literally, using my credit card, purchased my membership with you guys. I'm covered by you guys, and I'm proud to say that. Now, while I do work with you guys also on trying to get the word out about attorneys on retainer, it's important that people know that I spent my own money to become a customer of you guys because it was that important to me. So if you do go to attorneysonretainer.us, you can use my discount code FTATF. Of course, my viewers know that discount code very well because I use it across most of the platforms that I work with. FTATF is super popular. If you use that, you get 50% off your sign-up membership. Not your membership, your sign-up. There's a sign-up fee, obviously. So that's where you get your 50% off. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, isn't that like a $50 knock off of that at the end of the $100 sign-up fee?
Normally $100 to enroll one time. If they use the code FTATF, which, by the way, they came to me and said, Mark, is it okay? Paul wants to use this code. I said, I love this guy already. I said, we're gonna work together just great because we're a free speech place. And again, free speech is an important issue, right? You got to be able to say fuck the ATF in a free country, or fuck the government, or whatever. Like, these are things that in a free country you get to say. Doesn't mean you should always say them, and maybe I shouldn't have said it like that, but I'm a man of, I believe in freedom, and the fact that I live in a place where I can say that and I'm not going to be arrested, that's important to treasure. It doesn't exist everywhere. So look, I would just tell people, we're a group of criminal defense lawyers, not just committed to freedom, but we love doing what we do. We love fighting the state, fighting the federal government. It's what we do. Like, if you want to make sure that if you're in a shooting, right, and you try to act in self-defense, even if you blew it, we specifically say we do not exclude criminal acts. Okay, if you're a thug and you're just trying to rob a bank, we're not going to cover you. But if you were trying to act in self-defense, you want to make sure that you're not dropped. I'm not an insurance company. I don't have to worry about an insurance license. We don't exclude so many of these things, right? If it's a criminal act, if you're a prohibited possessor, the firearm's illegal, it happened in a sensitive place where guns are prohibited. None of this stuff, domestic violence, alcohol involved, we don't exclude any of that stuff. We love doing, my team is excited about doing these cases. And I also think it's important to know, you were saying good things about the Attorneys on Retainer program before we met, before we were doing any business together. We reached out to you and said, hey, we like how this guy does his show. We like that he's understanding the difference between an insurance-backed company and a bunch of lawyers. Like, if you want criminal defense, probably better to go to a criminal defense team of lawyers than an insurance company. But, there are things we don't offer. We just put out a video. People say, Mark, you make these fiery videos where you critique all these other companies. I just put one out critiquing the Attorneys on Retainer program. Like, we're super transparent at our firm. When you sign up, you're going to get an hour-long video from me going through every single word of our contract, explaining it without legalese. If it's not a win for you, it's not a win for us. We don't even want you in the program. We want you to understand what it is, what it isn't, what we do, who we are. Come visit the firm, see who we are. And the more information people have about who we are and what we're about, like, our firm's been around 27 years. You can check out Attorneys for Freedom. We're going to have your back. If what you're looking for is a team, and I'm assembling the best team I can possibly find, investigators, use of force experts. We're trying to bring an all-star team. We're playing to win. I'm not confused about the kind of job we need to do for people. I know why people are signing up in Attorneys on Retainer and leaving these other companies. Like, we know what our mission is, and I'm a Marine at heart. We're not going to fail the mission. We're going to deliver on our end. And we know guys like you are out there talking about AOR, and I don't want you calling me someday saying, hey, Mark, I put my reputation out there on Attorneys on Retainer. Why didn't you guys deliver? That call's never coming. I don't want that call. I want the call that says, gee, Mark, you guys really went above and beyond. You delivered more than we expected. You were going to come strong, but you even brought it stronger. And again, I can't promise, what the outcome is going to be of any case, because it depends on the facts, right? You might have been involved in a bad shoot. The best deal for you might be to take a plea. I don't make those decisions. The client does, but you don't lose your coverage with us. If you decide to take a plea, we'll still defend you in the civil case. We still do everything we said we're going to do in our case. So I don't know what it would be like to be in one of these programs where if you take a deal, and a lot of people in the system take deals, it's over 95%, where you might lose your coverage or maybe even be forced to have to pay back the benefits. I mean, companies have this stuff in their contract, whether they say they use that clause or not, I don't know, but it's in there. If they're not going to use it, take it out.
Right. Yeah. Now, and I will say this, the fire that you use in this video is what encourages me to know that if I have to make that phone call to attorneys on retainer, that's the kind of fire that I want defending me in the event that I have to pull that trigger. And I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to patronize you. I mean, that's who I want on the other end of that phone call, and that's who I want in the courtroom with me.
Paul, that's as calm as I get. When I get fired up in court, I'm not afraid. We're not afraid. Like, look, we always bring it within the rules of professionalism because the course we've charted at our firm is to be aggressive, professional, but within the realm of ethics responsibility, because otherwise the judge doesn't respect you, the prosecutor doesn't respect you. If you got to talk to the prosecutors I've dealt with and judges I've dealt with over 30 years of practice now, they would say, Marc's tough, but you could do a deal with Marc on a handshake. Marc's not going to BS. He's not going to bring frivolous motions. He'll bring creative motions. He'll push it as far as it can be pushed right up to the line. And true to course, we get referrals from judges. I've had state judges and federal judges refer cases to me. Prosecutors have come to my office. Other criminal defense lawyers, when they get in trouble, have come to my office. I get cops. Court reporters refer me. I spoke at the Court Reporters Convention here last year. To me, that's the best compliment of all. Because if you can get the court reporters sitting there in court all day, watching a parade of people coming through, and they say, Marc, we want you to come speak to us. We refer, when our family members get in trouble, we send them to your firm. That warms my heart because people notice the job you do. People, when guys sitting in the box say, I want that lawyer. And the people in the back of the courtroom say, hey, give me your card, that kind of thing. That's the way we bring it. We're not just trying to get cases resolved. I got people here who are lawyers. They're craftsmen. They like being lawyers. They like fighting. You might imagine they like fighting the state. We see that as look, it's the last stop before a tyrannical government. If the government's going to make an accusation and put you in a cage, guess what? Criminal defense lawyers, the only thing standing between you and a fair trial, especially in a bad accusation. So we defend them because everybody gets a defense in a free country. The second we give that up, we're not free anymore. And we believe in that. We buy into that. We're going to fight every case hard.
I want to thank you for keeping me in line because I'm so used to my videos getting demonetized. And by you saying, fuck the ATF, I know this one's going to get demonetized. So it won't spoil me and let my videos get monetized. I'm just joking with you.
Sorry, man. Sometimes I get fired up sometimes. And let me just say, dude, to be fair, there's some good guys who work at the ATF. I've met them. They come to my office. They say, Marc, you're doing a good job. There are guys who are reasonable at the ATF, so it's probably not accurate.
Take your word for that. I have no proof of that, but
I could introduce you to some. There are guys at the ATF who say, Marc, I agree with you on everything you say about the Second Amendment. I don't even like enforcing these laws. To which I say, well, then stop enforcing them. They say, well, it's a job. It's not my role to change the law. I get that. I couldn't do it as a judge, which is why I didn't make it as a judge, because I'm not sending anybody to jail or prison for violating something that should not be a law. Nobody can make me do it. I don't care. I don't compromise my character and my integrity and my principles for anybody or anything ever, period. So that's how I feel about it. Those are the kind of people who work at my firm. We stand for something. So I'm very proud of what we do, and I'm proud to have you on, Paul. I wouldn't just have anybody pushing what we're about. I like the fact that you're responsible, you're even-handed, you're civilized, even though you put FTATF out there, right. Which I got to say, as an American, I love and respect.
Right. Well, Marc, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a good time. I would like to let the viewers know that my goal is, and I think you guys are okay with it too, is that we get together probably once a month, and we'll probably pick some various things, and you pick them or I pick them, and things that will affect the gun community as far as decisions made. Because let's face it, Marc, you don't want that phone call. If we can prevent it on our end as a customer of AOR, obviously, I don't want to ever have to make this phone call to you guys. So I want to make sure we're making the right decision on our end before we even involve you. So I think that some of our discussions about various types of shooting, was this a good shoot? Was this a bad shoot? Questionable, whatever. if we can have that conversation, maybe we can educate a lot of our viewers out there and make sure that we're making the best decision we can make before we have to, unfortunately, pick up that phone and call you guys.
I know none of you guys want to make that phone call, but sometimes you got to make it. And when you do make it, believe me, we're ready for that call. We do fire drills at my firm. We've already had some people make that call. And if you check our reviews, you'll find some AOR members who said, you know what, I made that call. And I got to say, Marc and Andy are on top of it. The whole strike force sprung into action. We have a whole video about our strike force. Like, we are ready to go if you got to make that call, because my commitment is I will represent everybody, all of my clients, exactly the way I'd want to be represented. And I don't want to go to prison or jail. I want an aggressive defense. When I pick up that phone, I want somebody helping me through what's probably going to be the toughest period of my life. That's what we do. So if you have to make that call, we got your back. That's what we're doing here. And we love what we do.
Sounds good, Marc. Look, best of luck to you. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And we'll see you next month.
Peace, brother. Looking forward to it.
All right, buddy.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry. I thought this was America. He's so horrible.